We often expect ourselves to move through life as though capacity has no limits, as though we're designed for continuous output. But as human beings, we've never actually lived that way. Capacity rises and it falls, and support matters. Rest matters. Relationships matter. The invisible reality surrounding our lives quietly shapes not only what becomes possible, but what remains unnamed. Welcome to Reweaving Systems from Nervous to Regulated. I'm Miss Jana, educator, system weaver, and your fellow traveler in how humans make sense of the world. This isn't a podcast. This is a nervous system attunement lab. In Season 2, The Bridge begins where the sanctuary leaves off. Not with more noticing, but with what do we do with what we've noticed? Here we explore how experience is shaped by the environments we've lived in, by the relationships we've been a part of, and by the stories we've learned to carry. If you've ever felt responsible for more than your share, or sensed that there's a larger story underneath what you're living, welcome to The Bridge. This is Reweaving Systems from Nervous to Regulated. I'm Miss Jana. You're listening to Season 2, the first arc of The Bridge, Honest Visibility. This is the full moon, a time for us to wander together as we continue to unravel more of the picture. And on today's episode, we will hold the question, what happens when conditions remain unseen? I'll never forget about a time in my life when I'd pull into my driveway after work and simply just sit. Sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for 20. The house was right there. My boys were inside. Home was only a few steps away. And yet I couldn't bring myself to open the car door. At the time, I could not have told you why that was. I only knew that I felt stuck. Looking back, I can smile a little because somewhere along the way, I started calling things I had to do my to-do list. It seemed fitting. It described all the crap on my plate. But every time I crossed something off my to-do list, I would add 3 more. Dinner happened to be one of the things waiting at the top of that list. Except dinner was never just dinner. It was 100 quiet decisions, all that needed to be made at the same time. And it went something like this. What could I make? What would everyone eat? Do I have enough ingredients to make that? Is the produce still fresh? What substitutions will I need to include? Who doesn't like onions? Who doesn't want this to be too spicy? None of those questions ever announced themselves as individual questions. They came like a rush of an experience. And when that rush would come in, it would come in as weight. So I wasn't sitting in my driveway necessarily thinking. I was sitting in my driveway going through 100 different questions about dinner. It wasn't that I was thinking, why can't I go inside? I didn't realize that's what was happening. What I realized is the story I was telling about myself. If I was more organized, if I'd planned better, if I was more disciplined, if I actually enjoyed cooking. Looking back now, I see dinner was never the deepest ache. The deepest ache is so much more quieter. I wanted to raise my children in a joyful home. I imagined dinners around the table, stories about our day, laughter, connection. Somewhere along the way, sitting in that driveway began to feel more like evidence. Evidence that I wasn't actually being the type of mother that I had hoped to be. The experience quietly became a story I told about myself. At that time, I couldn't see anything beyond the story. And this is the strange thing. I actually really love cooking. Given space, I find it creative, even really grounding, to be honest. But space simply isn't enough. Because during that time when I sat in my driveway, my day had already asked a great deal of me. My capacity was narrowed long before I ever opened the refrigerator. I couldn't see that then. The only thing I could see back then was the impossibility of the moment. The only thing I could see back then was the way I tried to explain the experience to myself. And it came through self-judgment, self-blame. Over time, I come to wonder if this is something many of us do. Human beings, we are meaning makers. Every experience quietly asks a question. What does this mean? Our minds naturally begin answering. And when we cannot see the whole picture, when the whole picture is not visible, we begin building meaning based off of the pieces we can see. Those meanings help us make sense of our lives. They help make us understandable. They're human. Yet, it's simply not the whole story. We often expect ourselves to move through life as though capacity has no limits, as though we're designed for continuous output. But as human beings, we've never actually lived that way. Capacity rises and it falls, and support matters. Rest matters. Relationships matter. The invisible reality surrounding our lives quietly shapes not only what becomes possible, but what remains unnamed. So many things can very quickly disappear from the story. The experience stays, the exhaustion stays, the weight stays, but what disappears is understanding the conditions that actually produced these responses. And because, as human beings, we like to make meaning, our minds make meaning from what is visible. But so often, we're missing so many factors that actually bring light to the whole story. I don't think most of us wake up one morning and decide who we are. Oh, I know everything about me today. That arrival arrives slowly, and it arrives over time, one interpretation, one unanswered experience, until we can begin explaining something that sounds like our identity. When the full picture is not visible, we will naturally make meaning from the pieces we can see. Over time, those partial meanings begin feeling like the whole story. What remains unnamed, we often carry as identity. Thinking back to the days sitting in the driveway, I don't see a woman who lacked love. I see a woman who is carrying an extraordinary amount of responsibility. I see a mother whose devotion far exceeded her capacity. I see someone trying to build a joyful home while living within conditions that constantly narrowed what was possible. The experience was real. The exhaustion was real. And the longing was real. The interpretation became understandable, but the picture wasn't complete. An experience can unravel and reveal something true without revealing the whole truth of who we actually are. I still think of those afternoons in the driveway. I don't actually remember what we had for dinner. I remember believing that moment was telling me something about the type of mother I was. And now that I can view that time of my life in a different light, I see something so much more fuller. I see love. I see responsibility. I see invisible labor. I see limited capacity. And I see conditions that I was not yet able to see or name. But as more of the picture became visible, so did more of me. This week, I invite you to carry one question. The next time an ordinary experience begins telling you something about who you are, the next time a familiar feeling quietly feels like evidence, the next time shame enters as a simple explanation, I invite you to pause. Perhaps there's more of the picture asking to be visible on the horizon. And perhaps we can gently wonder, what have I made about me that isn't actually the full picture? During the full moon, what is here is no longer here alone. We have brought the threads to the loom together. And our next episode lands on the last quarter moon, our final episode in the first arc of Season 2, The Bridge. And we'll be discussing what is shaping the lens. Until we meet again, the loom holds and the threads remain.